William stared at his phone screen for the 20th time that morning, watching the three dots appear and disappear as Kate typed and deleted her message. They had been together for 7 years, and he knew her habits better than anyone. When she took this long to respond, something was seriously wrong. The coffee shop around the corner from their shared apartment had become their safe space. It was where they had their first official date, where William had nervously asked her to move in with him, and where they celebrated every milestone in their relationship. The familiar smell of roasted beans and the gentle hum of conversation usually brought him comfort, but today everything felt different. William arrived 30 minutes early, choosing their usual table by the window. He watched people walk by on the busy street, each lost in their own world, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee cup, trying to find warmth in the ceramic that seemed to escape him entirely. Kate walked through the door at exactly 2 o'clock, just as she always did. Punctuality was one of her many qualities that William admired, but something was off about her usual confident stride. Her shoulders seemed heavier, and she avoided making eye contact with him until she was sitting directly across from him at their small, round table. "Thank you for meeting me here," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that William had never heard before. "I know this place means a lot to us both." William reached across the table to take her hand, but she gently pulled away, placing both hands in her lap. That simple gesture sent a chill through his entire body. Kate had never refused his touch before, not once in all their years together. "Kate, what's going on? You've been distant for weeks now. I've been trying to give you space, thinking maybe work was stressing you out, but this feels like something more serious." She finally looked up at him, and William saw something in her green eyes that made his stomach drop. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was sadness mixed with something else he couldn't quite identify. Resignation, perhaps, or maybe it was relief. "William, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me say everything before you respond. Can you do that for me?" He nodded, though every instinct in his body was screaming at him to interrupt, to fix whatever was wrong, to make promises he wasn't even sure he could keep. William had always been a problem solver, but as he sat there watching the woman he loved struggle to find her words, he realized this might be a problem he couldn't solve. Kate took a deep breath and began speaking in a measured tone, as if she had rehearsed these words countless times in her mind. "Do you remember when we first started talking about our future together? We were lying in bed on a Sunday morning about 2 years ago, and you asked me what I wanted our life to look like in 10 years. William remembered that conversation perfectly. It was one of those lazy mornings where they had nowhere to be and all the time in the world. Kate had talked about traveling together, maybe getting a dog, and eventually starting a family. William had pictured them growing old together in a house with a big backyard where their children would play. "I told you I wanted to see the world," Kate continued, her voice growing stronger. "I talked about all the places we would visit together, the adventures we would have. But there was something I didn't tell you that day, something I've been keeping inside for years." The coffee shop noise seemed to fade into the background as William focused entirely on Kate's words. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, and his palms had become sweaty despite the cool autumn air coming through the slightly open window. "When I was a little girl, my grandmother used to tell me stories about her sister, my great-aunt. Never married, never had children. She spent her entire life traveling the world as a photographer for National Geographic. She documented cultures that were disappearing, captured moments that would have been lost forever if not for her courage to venture into places most people would never go." William listened intently, trying to understand where this story was leading, but a growing sense of dread was building in his chest. "My grandmother always told me that was the happiest person she ever knew. She said lived more life in her 60 years than most people live in twice that time. I used to fall asleep as a child, dreaming about following in her footsteps." Kate paused to take a sip of her untouched coffee, and William noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Whatever she was about to say next was clearly difficult for her. "3 months ago, I got a phone call that changed everything. Do you remember the day I came home from work and seemed really quiet? You asked me what was wrong, and I said it was just a difficult day at the office." William nodded. He remembered that day clearly because it was so unlike Kate to bring work stress home with her. She had always been good at compartmentalizing different parts of her life. "That phone call wasn't from work. It was from the editor-in-chief of World Explorer magazine. They offered me a position as their lead international correspondent. It's a 3-year contract, William. 3 years of traveling to different countries, documenting stories that matter, making a real difference in the world. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that William wasn't sure he wanted to cross. He could see the excitement in Kate's eyes despite her obvious nervousness, and he realized this wasn't just an opportunity for her. This was her dream, the one she had been carrying since childhood. "Where would you be based?" William asked quietly, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "That's just it," Kate replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't be based anywhere. The job requires constant travel. I would be gone for months at a time, sometimes to places where communication with home would be impossible. This isn't the kind of position where you can maintain a normal relationship." William felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. He understood now why she had been distant, why she had been pulling away. She hadn't been trying to hurt him. She had been trying to prepare both of them for this moment. "Have you already accepted?" he asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Kate's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment William thought there might still be hope. Maybe she was asking for his opinion, maybe they could figure out a way to make it work. "William, I need you to understand something. This opportunity will never come again. I'm 32 years old. If I don't take this chance now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. I'll grow to resent the life we build together because I'll always feel like I settled for something safe instead of pursuing what I really wanted." The weight of her words settled on William's shoulders like a heavy blanket. He had always known that Kate was ambitious, that she had dreams beyond their small-town life. But he had somehow convinced himself that their love would be enough, that she would choose him over everything else. "So you're leaving," he said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. Kate reached across the table and placed her hand over his. This time, she didn't pull away when he turned his palm up to hold hers. "I leave in 6 weeks," she whispered, and William felt his world begin to crumble around him. The 6 weeks that followed felt like living in a strange dream where everything looked the same but nothing felt real anymore. William went through the motions of his daily routine, but every familiar activity now carried the bitter taste of an ending. He would wake up next to Kate each morning, and for a few precious seconds, he would forget about her announcement. Then reality would crash over him like a cold wave, and he would remember that their days together were numbered. Kate tried to maintain normalcy, but William could see the guilt eating away at her. She would catch herself laughing at his jokes and then immediately look sad, as if she felt wrong for enjoying their time together when she knew she was about to break his heart completely. She started sleeping on her side of the bed without touching him, creating an invisible wall that grew a little wider each night. Work became William's refuge. He threw himself into his job at the local newspaper with an intensity that surprised his colleagues. As a senior reporter covering community events and local politics, William had always been thorough, but now he was relentless. He stayed late every night, volunteering for weekend assignments, anything to avoid going home to the apartment that felt more like a waiting room for heartbreak. His editor noticed the change immediately. Had been in the newspaper business for 30 years and had seen her share of personal crises play out in the newsroom. She found William at his desk one Thursday evening at 9 o'clock, long after everyone else had gone home. "You know, William, in all my years managing reporters, I've learned that the ones who suddenly become workaholics are usually running away from something they can't control at home." William looked up from his computer screen, his eyes red from staring at the bright monitor for hours. "Just trying to stay on top of my stories. The city council meeting ran long today, and I want to get this piece finished tonight." Sat down in the chair across from his desk, making it clear she wasn't going anywhere until they talked. "The city council meeting was 3 hours ago, and I know for a fact you finished that article before most people had dinner. What's really going on?" Something about's maternal tone broke through William's defenses. Maybe it was because she reminded him of his own mother, or maybe he was just tired of carrying the weight alone. Either way, the whole story came pouring out. He told her about Kate's job offer, about the 6 weeks countdown, about the way his entire future had disappeared in the span of a single coffee shop conversation. Listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding her head in understanding. When William finished talking, she was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "Can I tell you something about my own life, William? Something I've never shared with anyone in this office." William nodded, grateful to focus on someone else's story for a while. When I was 28, I was engaged to a man named David. We had been together for 4 years, and everyone expected us to get married and start a family. David was a good man, reliable and kind, and he loved me very much. But I had just been offered a job at the Washington Post, my dream job. David couldn't leave his family business, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity. We had a choice to make. "What did you do?" William asked, though he suspected he knew how the story ended. "I took the job and broke off our engagement. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and for months afterward I questioned whether I had made the right choice. David married someone else 2 years later, and they had 3 beautiful children. I spent the next decade building my career, traveling the world, covering stories that mattered." Paused, and William could see both pride and sadness in her expression. "I don't regret the choice I made, William, but I want you to understand something important. Neither choice would have been wrong. If I had married David and given up the Washington Post job, that would have been a valid choice too. The tragedy isn't in making a difficult decision. It's in resenting the choice you make." William considered her words carefully. "Are you saying I should encourage Kate to go?" "I'm saying you should think very carefully about what you're going to do with these next few weeks. You can spend them being angry and distant, trying to protect yourself from the pain that's coming. Or you can spend them loving her fully, supporting her dream, and creating memories that will help both of you move forward without bitterness." That conversation changed something fundamental in William's approach to the situation. He realized he had been so focused on his own heartbreak that he hadn't considered how difficult this decision was for Kate. She wasn't leaving because she didn't love him. She was leaving because she loved herself enough to pursue her dreams, even when it meant sacrificing something precious. The next evening, William came home with groceries and a plan. He cooked Kate's favorite meal, opened a bottle of wine they had been saving for a special occasion, and set the table with the good china they rarely used. When Kate walked through the door after work, she found him waiting with a smile that wasn't forced or bitter, but genuinely warm. "What's all this?" she asked, clearly surprised by the effort he had put into the evening. "I realized I've been handling this all wrong," William said, pulling out her chair for her. "We have 4 more weeks together, and I want them to be good weeks. I want to celebrate your opportunity instead of mourning it." Kate's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in weeks, they seemed to be tears of relief rather than guilt. "William, I need you to know how hard this is for me. I love you so much, and leaving you feels like cutting out a part of my heart." "I know," he replied, sitting down across from her. "And I need you to know that I understand why you have to go. This is your dream, Kate. I've watched you light up every time you talk about travel and adventure. I would be selfish to ask you to give that up for me." They talked through dinner like they hadn't talked in months. Kate shared more details about the job, the places she would go, the stories she hoped to tell. William found himself genuinely excited for her, asking questions and offering encouragement. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared, but he had found a way to love her that didn't require her to choose him over her dreams. That night they made love for the first time since her announcement. It was different from before, tinged with the knowledge that their physical relationship was also temporary, but it was also more intense and meaningful. They held each other afterward, not talking, just appreciating the warmth and comfort of being together. The following weeks took on a different quality. They made a list of all the things they wanted to do together before Kate left, and they worked through it methodically. They visited the art museum where they had spent their second date, went hiking at the state park where William had first told Kate he loved her, and took a weekend trip to the beach town where Kate had met William's parents for the first time. Each experience was bittersweet, but William found that the sweetness was stronger than the bitter. He was creating a collection of final memories with the woman he loved, and rather than focusing on the fact that they were final, he tried to appreciate how special they were. Kate seemed to relax as William's support became genuine rather than forced. She started talking about her fears regarding the new job, admitting that she was terrified of being lonely, of not being good enough, of missing home so much that she couldn't focus on her work. William became her sounding board, helping her work through her anxieties and building her confidence. 3 weeks before her departure, Kate brought home a stack of travel guides and maps. She spread them out on their living room floor and showed William all the places she would visit in her first year. They spent hours looking at pictures of remote villages, ancient temples, and bustling markets in countries William had only read about in newspapers. "I wish you could come with me. Kate said quietly as they looked at a photograph of a sunset over the African savanna. I wish I could too, William replied honestly. But this is your adventure, Kate. You need to have it on your own terms without worrying about me or feeling guilty about the life you left behind. 2 weeks before her departure, they had their first fight since her announcement. It started over something small, a disagreement about whether to keep or sell some of their shared furniture, but it quickly escalated into all the emotions they had been carefully managing. Sometimes I think you're being too understanding, Kate said, her voice rising with frustration. Sometimes I want you to be angry, to fight for us, to ask me to stay. This reasonable, supportive version of you makes me feel like our relationship didn't matter as much as I thought it did. William was quiet for a long moment, recognizing the truth in her words. You want me to fight for you? Part of me does, yes. Okay, William said, standing up and facing her directly. Kate, I love you more than I have ever loved anyone in my life. I love the way you laugh at movies that aren't funny, the way you always order dessert even when you say you're too full, the way you fall asleep reading and wake up with bookmarks pressed into your cheek. I love your ambition and your kindness, and the way you make me want to be a better man. Kate started to speak, but William held up his hand. I'm not finished. If I thought fighting would change your mind, I would fight. I would beg you to stay, promise you anything you wanted, try to convince you that we could make it work somehow. But I know you, Kate. I know that if you don't take this opportunity, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. And eventually, that wondering would poison what we have together. Tears were streaming down Kate's face now, and William felt his own eyes burning. So yes, I'm being understanding because I love you enough to want you to be happy, even if your happiness doesn't include me. That's not because our relationship doesn't matter. It's because it matters so much that I want what's best for you, even when it breaks my heart. Kate crossed the room and threw her arms around William, holding him than she had in months. They stood there in their living room, surrounded by the life they had built together, crying for what they were about to lose and what Kate was about to gain. The final week arrived faster than either of them had expected, despite how slowly each individual day had seemed to pass. Kate's apartment had been transformed into a staging area for her new life. Suitcases lay open on the bed, carefully organized piles of clothes covered every surface, and shipping boxes lined the hallway, filled with belongings she would store at her sister's house until she figured out what to do with them permanently. William watched Kate pack with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. She approached the task with the same methodical efficiency she brought to everything in her life, but he could see the emotional weight in the way she handled certain items. She held their framed photo from last year's vacation for a long time before carefully wrapping it in tissue paper and placing it in a box marked storage. She folded the sweater he had given her for Christmas with extra care, then packed it in her suitcase even though she was headed to tropical climates where she would never need it. Are you having second thoughts? William asked as he watched her stare at a coffee mug they had bought together on their first weekend trip. Kate looked up at him with tired eyes. The stress of preparing for such a major life change had taken its toll on both of them, but Kate bore the additional burden of knowing she was the one causing the pain they were both feeling. Every few minutes, she admitted, I keep thinking about how much easier it would be to just call them and say I changed my mind. We could go back to our normal life, pretend this never happened. But you won't do that. No, she said firmly. I won't, but that doesn't make this any less terrifying. William sat down next to her on the bed, moving a stack of folded shirts to make room. Can I tell you something? I'm proud of you for being scared and doing it anyway. That's what real courage looks like. That evening, Kate's sister Emma came over to help with the final packing and to say goodbye. Emma had always been protective of Kate, and William could tell she wasn't entirely comfortable with her sister's decision. She had been supportive in public, but William caught her giving him sympathetic looks when Kate wasn't watching. Are you sure about this? Emma asked Kate while they were alone in the kitchen, boxing up the last of the dishes Kate wanted to keep. It's not too late to change your mind. I'm sure, Kate replied, though her voice carried less conviction than usual. This is something I have to do, Emma. I've been dreaming about this kind of opportunity my entire adult life. But William is good for you. You're happy with him. How many people can say they've found someone who loves them the way he loves you? William hadn't meant to overhear the conversation, but the kitchen was adjacent to the living room where he was boxing books, and their voices carried. He found himself holding his breath, waiting to hear Kate's response. "That's exactly why this is so hard," Kate said, and William could hear tears in her voice. "William is wonderful. He's kind and supportive, and he makes me laugh every day. In a perfect world, I would take this job and he would come with me and we would have this amazing adventure together." "So why can't that happen?" "Because it's not his dream, Emma. It's mine. William has a life here, a career he's worked hard to build, friends and family who depend on him. I can't ask him to give all that up to follow me around the world for 3 years. It wouldn't be fair to him, and eventually he would resent me for it." William felt a complex mix of emotions hearing Kate's words. Part of him wanted to rush into the kitchen and tell her that he would follow her anywhere, that his career and his life here didn't matter compared to being with her. But he also knew she was right. He had never wanted to be a traveling correspondent, had never dreamed of living out of hotels and working in foreign countries where he didn't speak the language. If he went with her, he would be doing it solely for love, and as much as that sounded romantic, he understood the practical problems it would create. The next morning was Kate's last full day in town. She had insisted on spending it alone with William, without the well-meaning interference of friends and family who wanted to see her off. They drove to the lake where they often went for walks, a place that held dozens of happy memories from their 7 years together. The October air was crisp and clear, with the kind of bright blue sky that made everything seem more vivid. They walked the familiar path around the lake in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. William found himself trying to memorize everything: the way Kate's hair caught the sunlight, the sound of leaves crunching under their feet, the way she unconsciously reached for his hand when they encountered a family of ducks near the water's edge. "I want to ask you something," Kate said as they sat on their favorite bench overlooking the lake. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." William turned to face her, nodding the serious expression on her face. "Okay. Do you think I'm making a mistake, not just for us but for me personally? Do you think I'm going to regret this?" The question caught William off guard. For weeks, he had been focusing on supporting her decision, but she was asking for his genuine opinion about whether her choice was wise. "I think," William said carefully, "that you would regret not taking this opportunity more than you'll regret taking it. I think you're brave and talented and perfectly suited for this kind of work. I think you'll be lonely sometimes and scared sometimes, but I also think you'll have experiences that most people only dream about." Kate nodded, seeming to consider his words. "What about you? What will you do?" It was a question William had been avoiding thinking about too deeply. For 7 years, his life had been built around their relationship. Their shared apartment, their weekend routines, their future plans had all been collaborative efforts. Now he would have to figure out who he was when he wasn't half of a couple. "I honestly don't know," he admitted. "I'll probably look for a new place to live. This apartment has too many memories of us for me to stay here alone. Maybe I'll finally take that journalism fellowship I've been thinking about, the one at the State University. I've been putting it off because it would mean a year away from home, but now there's nothing keeping me here." "That sounds like a good opportunity," Kate said, and William could hear her trying to inject enthusiasm into her voice. "You've always wanted to teach. Maybe we'll both be starting new chapters at the same time." They spent the rest of the day doing ordinary things that felt extraordinary because they knew it was the last time. They cooked dinner together, with Kate teaching William how to make her grandmother's pasta sauce recipe. They watched a movie on the couch, with Kate curled up against William's side the way she had done hundreds of times before. They talked about books they wanted to read, places William might visit if he took the fellowship, and carefully avoided talking about the fact that Kate's flight was leaving at 10 o'clock the next morning. That night they lay awake in bed for hours, neither willing to fall asleep and lose their last few hours together. They talked about their first date, laughing about how nervous they had both been. They remembered their first fight, their first vacation, the day they had decided to move in together. They were creating a verbal scrapbook of their relationship, a way to honor what they had shared before it officially ended. "William," Kate whispered in the darkness around 3 in the morning, "I need you to know that loving you has been the best part of my life so far. Even though I'm leaving, even though this is ending, I will never regret a single day we spent together." "I feel the same way," William replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You've made me a better person, Kate. You've shown me what it means to love someone completely and to be loved the same way in return." They made love one last time as the sun was beginning to rise, with a tenderness and intensity that felt like both a celebration and a goodbye. Afterward, they held each other as the room gradually filled with morning light, both knowing that their time was almost over. Kate's flight was at 10 in the morning, which meant she needed to leave for the airport by 7:30 to account for traffic and security lines. They had decided the night before that William would not come to the airport with her. They both knew that saying goodbye in a crowded terminal would be too difficult, too public for the kind of emotion they were feeling. Instead, they would say their final goodbye in the apartment they had shared, surrounded by the life they had built together. At 7:15, Kate's taxi pulled up outside their building. William carried her suitcases downstairs while Kate did a final walk through the apartment, checking for anything she might have forgotten. When she came down to the lobby, her face was pale but determined. "This is it," she said, trying to smile but not quite succeeding. William pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest and breathing in the scent of her shampoo one last time. He had planned what he wanted to say to her, but now that the moment was here, words seemed inadequate. "I love you," he said simply. "I will always love you, and I want you to have the most incredible adventure." "I love you too," Kate replied, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." They held each other for a long moment, both reluctant to let go and make this separation real. Finally, Kate pulled back and looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Don't watch me get in the taxi," she said. "I need to walk away without looking back, or I'll never be able to do it." William nodded, understanding what she meant. He kissed her one last time, tasting salt from her tears on his lips. "Go," he said gently. "Go have your adventure." Kate picked up her carry-on bag and walked toward the taxi without turning around. William watched her go, his heart breaking with every step she took away from him. The taxi driver loaded her suitcases into the trunk, and Kate climbed into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, William caught a glimpse of her face through the rear window. She was crying, but she didn't look back. William stood in the empty lobby for several minutes after the taxi disappeared from view, unable to move or think clearly. The silence felt overwhelming after months of constant conversation about Kate's departure. Now that she was actually gone, he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do next. The apartment upstairs would feel too empty, but he couldn't imagine going anywhere else either. Eventually, he climbed the stairs back to their apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he opened the door, the space looked exactly the same as it had an hour earlier, but it felt completely different. Kate's absence was a tangible thing, filling every corner with a quiet sadness that made William's chest tight with grief. He walked through each room slowly, noting the small changes that marked Kate's departure. Her coffee cup was gone from the kitchen counter. The bathroom felt too spacious without her toiletries crowding the sink. Their bedroom looked strange with only his clothes hanging in the closet. These were all changes he had expected, but experiencing them was harder than he had imagined. William called in sick to work, something he had never done unless he was actually ill. He spent the day moving through the apartment like a ghost, unsure how to fill the hours that would normally be spent talking to Kate or planning their evening together. He ordered takeout for dinner but barely touched it. He tried to watch television but couldn't focus on anything for more than a few minutes. The hardest part was bedtime. William lay on his side of the bed, staring at the empty space where Kate usually slept. He could still smell her perfume on the pillows, a reminder of how recently she had been there. Sleep felt impossible, but staying awake felt like torture. He found himself checking his phone obsessively, hopping for a message that she had landed safely, but knowing that she had probably turned her phone off for the international flight. Kate's first message came 18 hours later, a brief text saying she had arrived in London and was catching her connecting flight to Nairobi. William stared at those words for a long time, trying to imagine Kate in an airport thousands of miles away, beginning the adventure they had talked about for weeks. He typed and deleted several responses before settling on a simple reply. "Safe travels. I'm proud of you." The next few days passed in a haze of routine and sadness. William went to work, came home, ate dinner alone, and went to bed early because he didn't know what else to do with himself. His colleagues noticed his subdued mood but respected his privacy, checked on him periodically, offering subtle support without prying into details he wasn't ready to share. On Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Kate's departure, William received a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was professional but warm, introducing herself as Dr. Sarah from the Columbia School of Journalism. "Mister, I'm calling about your application for our Investigative Journalism Fellowship. I know the deadline was several months ago, but we've had a last-minute opening in our program, and your application was particularly impressive. Would you be interested in discussing this opportunity?" William had submitted that application almost 6 months earlier, during a period when he was feeling restless in his current position, but couldn't justify leaving Kate to pursue further education. He had forgotten about it completely in the chaos of the past few months. "I would be very interested," William heard himself saying. "Can you tell me more about the timing?" The fellowship would begin in January and run through December of next year. It's a full-time program that includes coursework, mentorship with established journalists, and hands-on experience with major publications. Fellows receive a stipend that covers living expenses, and housing is provided in our residence facility. William's mind raced as Doctor explained the details of the program. It would mean leaving his job, leaving his, starting completely over in a new city. 6 months ago, these factors would have made the opportunity impossible to consider. Now, they seemed like exactly what he needed. "I would like to schedule an interview," William said, surprising himself with his decisiveness. 2 weeks later, William found himself on a train to New York City for his interview. As the familiar landscape of his gave way to the urban sprawl of the East Coast, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Kate's departure: excitement about the future. The interview went well, and Doctor offered him the fellowship on the spot. "You have a unique perspective on small-town issues and local government," she explained. "We think you could bring valuable insights to our program, and we believe this experience will enhance your ability to tell important stories." William accepted the fellowship immediately, then spent the train ride home planning the major changes he would need to make in his life. He would have to quit his job, give notice on the apartment, and figure out what to do with 7 years' worth of accumulated belongings. For the first time since Kate left, he felt energized rather than exhausted. The apartment search proved to be cathartic in unexpected ways. Going through their shared possessions, William found himself able to let go of things he would have clung to desperately just weeks earlier. He kept a few meaningful items: a framed photo of Kate laughing at something he had said, a cookbook they had used for their Sunday morning breakfast experiments, a book of poetry Kate had given him for his birthday. Everything else he either sold, donated, or threw away. His colleagues at the newspaper threw him a going-away party that turned into an unexpectedly emotional evening. William realized how many friendships he had neglected during his relationship with Kate, not intentionally, but because it's easy to become insular when you're part of a happy couple. Now, faced with starting over, he appreciated the support and encouragement of people who had been quietly rooting for him all along. Pulled him aside during the party to give him a gift, a leather-bound notebook for his fellowship work. "I want you to promise me something," she said seriously. "Don't spend the next year comparing every experience to what it would have been like if Kate were there. This is your adventure, William. Let it be yours completely." William promised, understanding the wisdom in her advice even as he recognized how difficult it would be to follow. The move to New York happened gradually, then all at once. William spent December cleaning out his old life and preparing for his new one. He stayed busy enough that the holidays didn't feel as lonely as he had feared they would. Kate sent him a Christmas card from somewhere in Kenya, with a brief note saying she was doing well and thinking of him. He sent her a card in return, addressed to the magazine's main office since she had no permanent address. The fellowship program exceeded William's expectations in every way. His fellow journalists were smart and passionate. His professors were accomplished professionals who pushed him to think differently about his work, and the city itself provided endless inspiration for stories. William found himself working harder than he ever had, but enjoying it more too. He lived in a small studio apartment in the residence building, a space that was entirely his own in a way he hadn't experienced since before he and Kate moved in together. He decorated it with his own taste, ate whatever he wanted for dinner, and fell asleep to the sounds of the city instead of someone else's breathing. The solitude, which he had feared would feel lonely, became a source of strength. 3 months into the program, William received an assignment that would take him to Southeast Asia for a month, working on a story about sustainable agriculture in developing countries. As he prepared for the trip, he thought about Kate, who was somewhere on the same continent pursuing her own stories. He wondered if their paths might cross, and realized that the thought excited rather than terrified him. The assignment in Thailand changed something fundamental about how William saw himself and his work. Working in a completely different culture, conducting interviews through translators, and navigating the complex social and political issues of a country he had never visited before, William discovered capabilities he hadn't known he possessed. He was good at this kind of work, better than he had expected to be. When he returned to New York, William felt like a different person than the one who had watched Kate drive away in that taxi 8 months earlier. He was more confident, more independent, and more excited about his career than he had ever been. The fellowship still had 5 months remaining, but he was already thinking about what he wanted to do next. That's when he received the email that would bring everything full circle. The message was from Kate, sent to his personal email address from an internet in Mumbai. It was longer than any communication they had exchanged since her departure, and reading it felt like hearing her voice for the first time in months. "William," it began, "I hope you're well and that the fellowship is everything you hoped it would be. I've been following your work online, and I'm so proud of the stories you're telling. You found your voice as a journalist, and it's beautiful to see. I'm writing because I have something important to tell you, and I wasn't sure if I should reach out or not. I've been thinking about our last conversation, about the choices we made and the reasons we made them. I want you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the right thing. This job has been incredible, William. I've seen parts of the world I never could have imagined, met people whose stories deserve to be told, and pushed myself professionally in ways that have made me a better journalist and a better person. But I've also been lonely in ways I didn't expect, and I've thought about you every single day. I'm not writing to ask you to wait for me or to suggest that we try to rebuild what we had. Too much has changed for both of us, and I think we're both different people than we were when I left. But I wanted you to know that loving you taught me how to love myself, and leaving you taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go. I hope you're happy, William. I hope you're having your own adventure and discovering things about yourself that you never knew before. I hope that, when we both look back on this time in our lives, we can see it as a period when we both became who we were meant to be. With love and gratitude, Kate." William read the email 3 times, feeling a complex mix of sadness and closure. Kate was right that they were both different people now, shaped by the choices they had made and the experiences they had pursued separately. The man who had watched her leave 8 months ago would have seen her email as an opening, a chance to restart their relationship. The man he was now understood that some chapters of life are meant to end so that new ones can begin. He wrote back a shorter message, thanking her for reaching out and sharing some highlights from his own journey. He told her about the story he was working on, about his plans after the fellowship ended, about the person he was becoming. He ended the email with the same words she had used, "with love and gratitude." After sending the message, William walked to his favorite coffee shop near campus. It was a place that reminded him vaguely of the shop where Kate had told him about her job offer, but it was entirely his own discovery, not connected to their shared history. He ordered his usual drink and found a table by the window, watching people hurry past on the busy street outside. For the first time since Kate had left, William felt completely at peace with their decision. They had loved each other deeply and purely, and then they had been brave enough to let that love evolve into something different. Kate had pursued her dreams and found her path. William had done the same. Neither choice had been wrong, and both had led to growth and happiness they couldn't have achieved together. As he sat in that coffee shop, planning his next story and thinking about the opportunities that lay ahead, William realized that Kate had given him the greatest gift possible. She had shown him what it looked like to love someone enough to let them go, and in doing so, she had taught him how to love himself enough to pursue his own dreams. The heartbreak was real, and it would always be a part of their story. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of 2 new stories, each more authentic and fulfilling because they had been chosen freely rather than settled for out of fear or comfort. William finished his coffee and walked back out into the bustling city, ready to write the next chapter of his life.